All right, so let's talk a little bit about expectations. And expectations, when you're judging anything in life, of course, we're talking about the Indianapolis Colts, but you take this life lesson with you throughout your days and years and however long you're around here. They're so important when you are judging things. For example, let's say twice in a week you're in the mood for a burger, right? And on Monday you go for a burger and you go to a 5-star restaurant, okay? And then on Friday you go for a burger and it's from McDonald's. You are not going to McDonald's and expecting the same burger you got on Monday. If you are, you're going to be severely disappointed, right? Disappointment is rooted in expectations. It's one of the things that anyone who has been here enough knows that I say all the time. And I bring this up because when we talk about the Colts and all that's about to happen, right, we're now less officially than a week away from the start of this season. We have to sit here and prepare for what we're about to see and set the proper expectations, because not for anything, if not for those, I mean, what are we to go off of, right? And listen, it's not always about a Super Bowl. I know in theory it is, right? But let's not pretend we're all winners and all that stuff. For example, the Arizona Cardinals, a completely unrelated team, but a team that we did do joint practice with, so I guess on some levels related to the Colts. Does success look like a Super Bowl for them this year? Be honest. If you're a Cardinals fan, are you expecting a Super Bowl? Or does success look a little something different than that? I say that because the Colts are very much in the same spot. The Colts are not winning a Super Bowl this year, okay? It's not the case. If they do, great. Listen, I'd be happy to be proven wrong about the Indianapolis Colts winning a Super Bowl, the possibility that they do. But my point is that when it comes to these Indianapolis Colts, success looks a little bit different than going into the playoffs, making a run, winning a Super Bowl. It's not all about that. When we talk about expectations for the Indianapolis Colts, what it really means when you peel back the first layer of that onion is, what are the expectations for Anthony Richardson? This season, make no mistake, is about Anthony Richardson and nobody else. So that is what we are going to talk about today. We're going to try to define success for the Indianapolis Colts. What are fair expectations for this team going into this season? In that, we're going to touch on why Chris Ballard's job is safe, whether you like it or not. This is beyond me supporting him, which a lot of you guys know I do. But why is his job safe? We're going to talk about that today. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the roster cuts and all of the roster movement, that type of stuff on the back end of the show, the less interesting things, right? But before we do, you know what it is. I got to introduce myself. My name is Justin. This right here is the Ride on the Bench Colts podcast. As always, ask anyone enjoying the show, go ahead, shoot a like. It's going to help me get out to as many fans as humanly possible. As always, audio listeners, 5-star review would be wonderfully appreciated. If not, I mean, that's totally fine. I guess just don't leave a 1-star. Of course, if you keep coming back to the YouTube channel and you're enjoying, go ahead, subscribe. Make sure you're one of the first people to see an episode when it comes out, particularly when I take long hiatuses. Again, like the one I just took. I'm very much sorry for that. But without further ado, let's get into the content. And I want to start right off the bat by putting a little damper on all of this excitement that we have to start this season, because I want to temper expectations for Anthony Richardson, because I feel like it is the fair thing to do. And it is okay that we temper expectations for him, okay? Think about this. Last year, when we drafted Anthony Richardson, rewind to, April of 2023. When this guy was drafted at the ripe age of 20 or 21 years old, we said that this guy is a project. It was widely accepted that he was a project. No one was asking any questions about that, to the point, albeit perhaps unjustified, there was discussion about whether or not he should actually even be the day one starter going in to last season, okay? Since then, the guy has played 4 full games of football, okay? Let alone the fact that he got injured, let alone the fact that he's just returning off of it, and let alone the fact that he's about to go into the start of this season, presumably, without Josh Downs. All I'm saying is, when it comes to Anthony Richardson, a little bit of patience is required for us Colts fans. An NFL season is a marathon, not a sprint. The Colts are notoriously slow starters, as illustrated by the fact that we have not won in week 1 since the year 2013, let alone all the seasons that we've seen where we started 2-5, 2-4, whatever it may be, and ended up making a playoff run. So whatever it is that we see to start this season, we do have to understand that that's not the final product. and it doesn't necessarily define what it is that this season's going to be. It's just something to keep in mind. It's going to be more so about what does it look like headed into this season, or rather throughout the season, as opposed to the end result. And if you ask me, I think what we should expect out of Anthony Richardson is this. We're going to have days and moments, and perhaps multiple times throughout the course of a game, this is going to change, as we saw in the first preseason game with Anthony Richardson, or was it the second one that he played? Right. It was week 3 preseason, his second preseason game. When we start off the game, he goes 7 of 8, 65 yards, easy drive for a touchdown, and after that, it was a tough time. You look back last year when we versed the Rams, we were down 23-0 in the first half. He leads a sensational comeback into the end of that game. So there's going to be good. There's going to be bad. There's going to be ups. There's going to be downs. There's going to be moments where we love Anthony Richardson. There's going to be moments where he's really pissing us off. There are going to be multiple games where he's the only reason we're in it and the only reason the other team is in it. Does that make sense? That very much is what happened when we versed the Bengals third stringers, okay? The point is, when you look at the Colts right now and you look at Anthony Richardson right now, to me, personally, when you talk about what success looks like for him, of course we want to win. Of course, all of those things are possible. And of course, we're trying to win. It's not like the Colts are coming in and trying not to win. But do the Colts appear, and does Anthony Richardson more specifically appear, to be headed in the right direction? Ultimately, the season comes down to when AR plays well, we will win often enough. And when he doesn't, we will lose. That's what it's all of it's about, right? It is not about Jonathan Taylor. It's not about DeForest Buckner. It's not about how Zaire Franklin plays or not Darrell Baker Jr. He's gone. Jalen Jones or Juju Brents, right? We could talk about all the guys that we like on this team. We enjoy this roster. A lot of us enjoy this roster, at least. Now every roster has holes in it. Chris Ballard is very right when he says that type of thing. But ultimately, the roster that we have in place has a lot of studs. Forget about the PFF Top 100. To have DeForest Buckner on that list is absolutely ridiculous. And if I'm to sit here and play the name game with all the different guys, I'll end up forgetting someone. The point is that doesn't matter who's on this roster. The difference is the quarterback position. It all comes down to whether or not Anthony Richardson plays well. And honestly, I don't see anyone disagreeing with that statement, right? Now, the good news is that last year we went 9-8 with Gardner Minshew Jr. playing. Is he Gardner Minshew Jr. or is he Gardner Minshew the third? I know he has something at the end of that, but neither here nor there. The guy's a Raider now. Who cares, right? We like Gardner. My point is this. I don't think there's any disagreement about what I'm saying right now. I think most people understand when you look at the Indianapolis Colts, it really doesn't matter how good the roster is. If the quarterback can't play, the quarterback can't play, and that goes across the league, okay? You have a roster that's very talented and your quarterback is below average. That's going to drag down your team. You have a great quarterback and a great roster. You're one of the best teams in the NFL, right? You're the Kansas City Chiefs and all that type of stuff. So with that being said, I want to bring that in to Chris Ballard because that very fact that I just said and 95% of you just agreed with is exactly why Chris Ballard's job is safe. And in my opinion, is probably why it should be safe. But the should and shouldn't is really besides the point. When you talk about Chris Ballard and what his job is as the general manager of this football team, it's very simple. It's to assemble a talented roster, not just this season, but one that can be sustained. And I think that's something that gets missed a lot by Colts fans, okay? Chris Ballard tries to build in such a way where he's not just all in this season. He tries to sustain the winning. But Justin, what's your point? What did Chris Ballard have to do with what you were just saying? This is what it is. If we acknowledge that the entire season is about whether or not Anthony Richardson plays well, if he is to come out and have an up and down season, and therefore the Colts have an up and down season, how can it also be true that at the end of the season, Chris Ballard should be fired? Both of those things cannot be happening at once. And I find it to be an interesting thing, right? So if it's all about Anthony, and Anthony is in his first full season as a quarterback, and he comes out, and the Colts ultimately, their win-loss record reflects how Anthony Richardson plays. If we acknowledge that that's true, at the end of the season, we can't then flip it around back on Chris Ballard because it was all about Anthony Richardson. At the end of the day, the truth of the matter is that Chris Ballard's job is tied to Anthony Richardson's rookie contract. If Anthony Richardson works out, Chris Ballard will be a made man in Indianapolis. If Anthony Richardson does not work out, that will spell the end for Chris Ballard being the GM for this organization. And quite frankly, that's how it should be at this point. But I know we always judge Chris Ballard through the prism of, okay, we've only won, well, really, we had no AFC South titles. We've had, 2 playoff appearances, 2 playoff wins. Point being is it hasn't been illustrious. We haven't been bottom feeders other than one season where the bottom fell out. We've just kind of been, floating around in mediocrity. That being said, we haven't had the quarterback, right? And you could say that's on Chris Ballard. Perhaps it is. But all of that aside, here we are in the present day, and Chris Ballard's job is tied to Anthony Richardson's rookie deal, meaning that he's not going to be fired this year if we do not win and we do not win playoff games. Ultimately, he's going to have this time to be judged, and I think that's how it should be. Now, on to some of the roster cuts, some of the more boring stuff, but we could talk about it before we sign off here for the day. Ronnie Harrison Jr., Darrell Baker Jr. Those were both very, very surprising cuts to me, right? Ronnie Harrison Jr., you come into this season, we're short on safeties, or at least we feel we're short on safeties. I think Nick Cross really, really came on, and the fact that he's playing in strong safety, I think allows him to play to his strengths a little bit more. I actually think a starting unit of Julian Blackmon and Nick Cross playing the strong safety as opposed to the free safety, I actually think you look pretty good at the starting safety. The question is the depth. You have Rodney McLeod, who we liked in his rookie year, but ultimately that was a 7th-round pick, and he disappointed last year. And then after that, you're down to Trevor Denbo, okay? I mean, listen, for a team that their weak point is the secondary, you would have thought that maybe we would have liked to have a little bit of extra depth there, right? Now, Darrell Baker Jr., on the other hand, we dropped him to pick up some 6th-rounder from the 49ers. Okay, totally fine. Chris Ballard came out here and said, listen, pal, he didn't say, listen, pal, I'm just paraphrasing. But he said, hey, we like this guy out of the draft, yada, yada, yada. Darrell Baker Jr. now a Tennessee Titan, much like L'Jarius Sneed. I'll tell you what, just a little side story. If Darrell Baker Jr. and L'Jarius Sneed are both very, very impressive for the Tennessee Titans, I mean, we're not going to be very, very happy about that. Now, are we? Listen, at the end of the day, this secondary situation is very simple because it's quite possible when it's all said and done, Chris Ballard is right about this group, that they were just young and they just needed to play and they need to get better. One thing he's said before is that, to become a player, you have to play, right? And I totally understand all of that. And I do like some of the talent we have. Obviously, Kenny Moore in the slot, spectacular. We know what he brings to the table. Juju Brents, Jalen Jones, I like both of those guys as young corners. All of that stuff. Great. But as Chris Ballard said, when everyone was getting on his ass about finally drafting a quarterback, he said, it's not just about drafting a quarterback. You got to be right. Well, okay, Chris Ballard, if we're going to use that as the litmus test, you got to be right about this secondary, right? Plain and simple. For this Colts defense to work, these guys have to come out and be competent. I think the defensive front should hold up their end of the bargain. The question is that enough to make this secondary come out and play consistent football? That's all it has to be. Evan Hull to the practice squad. Not for anything. Good. I'm glad. I don't know, and no disrespect to Evan Hull. I think he'll be a great 4th-string running back, okay? But I don't know why so many of you guys are so high on Evan Hull. And I mean this with no disrespect. Of course, everyone in the NFL is an excellent football player, the top 1% of football players on planet Earth, okay? But when it comes to an NFL talent at running back, Evan Hull is painfully average, right? And now we have playoff Lenny coming in allegedly for a visit, and we'll see how that goes. Does that really move the needle for the Indianapolis Colts? No, not quite. But if you ask me what running back room I like better, Jonathan Taylor, Trey Sermon, Leonard Fournette, and Tyler Goodson, or Jonathan Taylor, Trey Sermon, Evan Hull, and Tyler Goodson, I'm going to take the former. I'm going to go with the one with Leonard Fournette over Evan Hull. Quite frankly, that is what it is. I mean, guys like Evan Hull, it's just the only fan base in all of football that can crap on a perpetual 1,000-yard receiver like Michael Pittman Jr. and then gush over people like Evan Hull and Jason Bean are the Indianapolis Colts fan base. And by the way, just on a side note, we might as well talk about that Jason Bean, Sam Ehlinger, that useless battle that doesn't ultimately matter or move the needle for this team, but it was something that was being talked about in the preseason. Listen, at the end of the day, I think the Colts looked at it and said, Sam Ehlinger knows the system, and he's been here. And ultimately, that was enough for them to give him the nod. Listen, if you're getting worked up over whether it's Jason Bean or Sam Ehlinger, in my opinion, you have your priorities in the wrong place as a fan of this football team. But it is what it is. Again, to wrap it all up in a bow, expectations for the Colts are very, very simple. As long as the Colts, in my opinion, are in the mix this year, we can assume this team is only going up moving forward. And ultimately, then we could assume that Anthony Richardson only goes up from there. My opinion, my standard is being in the mix. Quite frankly, that was my standard last year. So I guess my standard hasn't raised in 1 year time, but I don't necessarily think that's a product of the organization being dysfunctional or shitty or anything like that. I just think you look at what it is, and it is what it is. You have a guy in Anthony Richardson who's incredibly young, coming off of surgery, albeit we assume 100% healthy as it currently stands coming into the year. There's going to be growing pains there. That's only natural. It was always going to be that way. We can't forget about it now because we had to wait a year for him and we're getting impatient, okay? Marathon, not a sprint, and that's what we're going to expect from the Indianapolis Colts this year. 1 week at a time, stay calm, and breathe. Because, spoiler alert, week 1, we're going to have to see. That's a topic for later on in the week. But without further ado, that was an episode. My name is Justin. This right here was the Riding the Bench Colts podcast. As always, like, subscribe, all that bullshit, or just click on to the next video, and it is what it is. But until next time, go Colts.